Hello and welcome back to another history video. In this time it is in Forgotten Hope 2. This history video is about the Battle of St Vith, and the Battle of St Vith was a part of the Battle of the Bulge. The Battle of the Bulge was Hitler's last attempt to achieve something in Western Europe. The plan was to cut through the Ardennes and to split the Allied armies like the Germans had done in 1940. This split would result in the collapse of the so-called unnatural alliance, according to Hitler, between the USA and Great Britain. And then Hitler would try and sign a separate peace with the Western Allies in order to turn on the Soviet Union together. The advance should go towards Antwerp, the major supply port for the Allies. And even though several high-ranking officers of the German army thought this was an impossible plan, they were trying to persuade Hitler to make crossing the Meuse River as a first goal, and then maybe, if everything was going well, then go to Antwerp afterwards. And these two versions of the plan were called the Big Hit, the Großer Schlag, and the Small Hit, the Kleiner Schlag. And a lot of commanders were in favor of the Kleiner Schlag. It was executed the way Hitler had envisioned it, so he didn't listen to those commanders and wanted to go to Antwerp. To make the whole plan work, the Germans needed bad weather, because the Allied air superiority meant that they would find out about the attack way too soon. Surprise was key. So everyone who knew about the plan had to sign a non-disclosure contract with execution by bullet as a punishment for breaking it. St Vith is in the German part of Belgium, the so-called East cantons. And in the past 2 centuries it has been part of France, Prussia, Belgium and Germany, depending on how the wars were developing. The flags on the map are all real locations, and St Vith is a pretty small town. In reality it resembles a bit more sort of a collection of hamlets, but it's really small, and although the map is a bit scaled down, it's not by a whole lot. It's of course scaled down because it's not only the town on the map, but also part of the forest surrounding it, and also some villages nearby in the northwest of St Vith. The name St Vith is derived from Saint Vitus, who was a Catholic patron saint, and he was the patron saint of actors, dancers, singers, dogs and epileptics, a curious combination. Okay, well, the map names, the flag names I mean. The Aachener path that we can see here, that means the path to Aachen, which was the city that the Americans had conquered in October 1944. Walleroder Wood over here is a forest which is still situated just east of the town, and Rosenhügel's farm over here is not really a farm anymore. It's now part of the town of St Vith, and Rosenhügel is now a road, just like as Friedenstraße, which means Peace Street, and in the map it's a bridge, but in reality it doesn't have a bridge, at least not in this day and age. The train station is in reality called the Gouvy station, located on the east side of town, just like on the map. Wiesenbach over here is Bach means brook, and Wiesenbach means that there's this brook going south of the town, and that also turned into a road. At least that's what it looks like on satellite pictures. Crossroads, well, I don't think I have to explain that that's called after the streets meeting each other. And then we have, of course, the town itself, where we have St. Joseph's Cloister. A cloister is an abbey, and it's an abbey in the town. It also played a role in the battle, as we will see later. Buchler Turm. A turm means tower in German, and Buchler Turm was part of the medieval city wall around St Vith, and it's the only pre-war architecture that survived the Second World War. The road to Malmedy is in the last sector in the map, together with these two over here. And it's interesting that in the map you move like this, in this direction, and in reality the Germans moved into St Vith from the north, so from the opposite direction. Malmedy, of course, the town which is north of St Vith, infamous for the Malmedy massacre in the opening days of the Battle of the Bulge. Then the last two flags are the twin villages Ober and Nieder Emmels, who are in real life also two small villages really close together. These two are also scaled down, and actually in the Battle of St Vith itself they didn't really play a very large role. Okay, so about St Vith in the German canton. The St Vith is, because it was German speaking, in April 1939 in the Belgian elections, over 45% of the people voted for the Heimattreue Front, which was a party that wanted to have the area belonging to the German Reich. So when the battle was raging, civilians in St Vith were distrusted by both sides. Americans didn't trust them because they had pictures of their sons in Wehrmacht uniform in their houses, and they spoke German. And the Germans didn't trust them because they hadn't followed the order to retreat behind the Siegfried Line in September. About 100 men in St Vith had already fallen in German service during the Second World War, and others had deserted and were hell-bent on not getting caught by the Sicherheitsdienst or the Feldgendarmerie, because then of course they would be executed. When the Germans were planning the Battle of the Bulge, intelligence found out about a 2-kilometer wide hole in the American line between the villages Roth and Walkaround to the east. These towns are now on the German-Belgian border. The Germans wanted to exploit this hole, so the 18th Volksgrenadier Division attacks this location on the 16th of December, because the German commander also von Manteuffel wanted to reach St Vith ASAP. This was important because, like the more famous Bastogne, St Vith had a network of roads vital for a march on the Meuse River. So, in the meantime, we have arrived in the forest just east of the town, and as we can see, there are a lot of pine trees and also sawn-off trees and some rocks, some destroyed vehicles over here, trucks and a panther. The German army was moving in on St Vith, and on the 17th of December they were closing in on the town, and the 18th and the 62nd Volksgrenadiers attacked the 106th Division of the United States Army under command of General Major Allen Jones, and they were attacking on the southeast side of the town. Jones is unpleasantly surprised by how the fight develops, because he wasn't expecting such a large opposing force, so he just calls for help from outside, for example from B Commando of 7th Armored Division, but their tanks got held up in the traffic jam caused by retreating units, because in all these days the weather was bad, just like the Germans had wanted for this offensive, And because of the bad weather, the roads were super muddy, and the muddy roads could not really hold the heavier vehicles like tanks, so the advance was really slow. The same went for the American vehicles trying to escape the area, because lots of Americans were panicking when they saw the Germans coming. So columns of vehicles were trying to go west, and they were also retreating towards the west of St Vith. The commander of 7th Armored Division, Brigadier General Bruce Clark, who was a huge fellow, he was the only person present in St Vith itself of that 7th Armored Division. Clark met with von Manteuffel after the war for the US Army made documentary about the Battle of St Vith in 1965, a link to which you can find in the source list in the description of the video. Jones called headquarters to report that everything was under control, and right at that moment Colonel Devine from 14th Cavalry entered the room and told them that there were German tanks hot on his heels. Devine was a bit of a nutcase. He had been hospitalized, and he had been treated with tranquilizers because he was, like I said, a bit crazy. He was released on the 19th of December, but re-hospitalized after he was found trying to do some traffic control in La Roche-en-Ardennes, attempting to turn around a tank column. So they didn't believe him, but in this case he actually told the truth. He was released not on the 19th of December, of course, but on the 19th of November earlier, otherwise he couldn't have been there. That was bad that they didn't believe him, but it was explainable. Apart from those tanks that Devine was talking about, there was an SS Kampfgruppe joining in on the attack. At 2:30 p.m. gunfire from hand weapons was heard, and Jones ordered Clark to defend St Vith. Clark only had 2 companies of engineers and a tank hunter platoon, and half an hour later the fight began. The tank hunters succeeded in driving back the Germans into the forest. The Germans were delayed by the muddy roads and the ensuing traffic jams. They had a lot of problems getting towards St Vith, and even though this hampered their attack, many Americans were panic-stricken, and they could be seen running westwards on the road west of the town. It looked more like a rout than a retreat. In the end of the afternoon, Brigadier General Robert Hasbrouck joined Jones and Clark. Okay, let's scale this fence. Hasbrouck joined Jones and Clark, and he concluded that saving the regiments east of the town was not feasible. About 15 to 20 kilometers east of the town, there were 2 infantry regiments, the 422nd and the 423rd. Never mind this inconsistency here. And they were defending some hills in the so-called Schnee-Eifel, the Snow Eifel. The Eifel are a bit of connected to the Ardennes. There's also a very hilly terrain, and in this Snow Eifel those regiments were trying to hold the Germans as long as possible. Well, Hasbrouck couldn't save them, so he needed to focus the defense on St Vith itself. Shortly after Hasbrouck decided that he could not do anything about it, the Volksgrenadiers of the 18th Division closed the pincer around the 422nd and 423rd regiments, and they were now completely cut off. The town of St Vith is situated on a hill, and that's portrayed in the map like this. You can see that the town looks like it's on a slope over there, and it's surrounded by other forested hills, as you can see here. These forested hills, they form a horseshoe-shaped ring around the town, and the Americans wanted to put their defenses on these surrounding hills to ensure the safety of the town. So Hasbrouck made work of it, and the defenses were put up. And the defenses were on the roads. The defenses in the Battle of the Bulge were largely made of these logs. Sometimes they were often made by explosives. They would put explosives to a tree. Engineers or sappers would do that, and then the tree would fall over the road as to block vehicles. And of course, for infantry, there were foxholes dug in into the ground. Von Manteuffel was outraged by the delay of the troops caused by the massive traffic jams on the roads. Both the 5th and the 6th Panzer armies were using the same roads, because one of those roads, that was close to St Vith, was on the border of the area of operations of both armies, and because the 6th army was advancing over a very narrow front, they thought that they had to use this road, which was actually reserved for the 5th, and this caused a lot of traffic jams and made the delays even longer. On the morning of the 18th of December, the Germans attacked the defense line set up by Hasbrouck. The German tanks opening fire caused hundreds of branches to fall down on the dug-in Americans, and they dug deeper into their foxholes, giving the Volksgrenadier divisions the opportunity to close in with automatic weapons, like the Sturmgewehr 44. The 18th Volksgrenadier Division had more experience than the 62nd, which was moving up on the south side of St Vith, in this area over here. A second attack at the end of the morning was supported by a Ferdinand, but when that came as close as 25 meters of the American line, it was taken out by a Sherman, who saw a shot ricochet into the hull. Also in these days was the famous story of the M8 Greyhound that was hiding behind a bunch of trees, and then a Tiger II was driving by. The M8 Greyhound snuck out behind it and tried to disable the Tiger II. The Tiger commander saw the car, wanted to turn the turret towards it, but the Greyhound was so fast that it came within 25 meters of the tank, popping off 3 shots, setting the tank on fire. In the afternoon of the 18th of December, a third attack followed, supported by 4 tanks and 8 Stugs. Only when the Shermans gave some enfilade fire, the attack was halted. The temperature dropped fast now, and snow began to fall. Manteuffel ordered Remer and his Führerbegleit unit, who were to the north of the town, to attack St Vith, but they too became stuck in the huge traffic jam that was the Battle of the Bulge. On the 19th of December, the Germans tried some probing attacks on St Vith, without any success, and the Americans later described that they saw lots of dead Germans hanging in the trees and that were landing there because of artillery explosions. The Americans found out that the Germans, among whom were the 9th SS Hohenstaufen, were making a westward move north of the town, and they feared that they might be cut off if those units were breaking through to the south, conquering towns west of St Vith. Fortunately for them, those divisions were moving towards the Meuse River, as Hitler had ordered, and they left St Vith alone. Hasbrouck now knew that he had to hold as long as possible, functioning as a breakwater for the 18th and 62nd Volksgrenadier divisions. These divisions now turned their full attention to St Vith because they had dealt with the 422nd and the 423rd regiments in the Snow Eifel, and they didn't have to worry about their rear anymore. On the 20th of December, command of the Allied armies in the north had passed to Bernard Montgomery, because Omar Bradley, the actual commander of these armies, was cut off in his headquarters in Luxembourg City. Montgomery wanted to retreat Hasbrouck's troops, but the Americans really hated to give up gained ground, so they actually wanted to try and hold it. First Army wanted to send 82nd Airborne to reinforce the defenders. In the afternoon they received a letter from Hasbrouck, and it was directed towards the 1st Army Chief of Staff, Major General William B. Keane. And it reads, "Dear Bill, I am out of touch with 8 Corps and understand 18 Airborne Corps is coming in. My division is defending the line St Vith, Poteau, both inclusive. CCB, 9th AD, the 424th Infantry Regiment of the 106th Division and the 112th Infantry Regiment of the 28th Division are on my right and hold from St Vith to Holdingen. Both infantry regiments are in bad shape. My right flank is wide open except for some reconnaissance elements, tank destroyers and stragglers we have collected and organized into defense teams at road centers back as far as Cherem inclusive." Hasbrouck meant Cherin there. 2 German divisions, 116 Panzer and 560 Volksgrenadiers are just starting to attack northwest with their right on Gouvy, the station over here. I can delay them the rest of today maybe, but will be cut off by tomorrow. 8 Corps has ordered me to hold, and I will do so, but need help. An attack from Bastogne to the northeast will relieve the situation and in turn cut the bastards off in rear. I also need plenty of air support. I'm out of contact with 8 Corps, so I'm sending this to you. Understand 82nd AB is coming up on my north, and the north flank is not critical. Bob Hasbrouck. So he was in trouble, and therefore he sent this letter for help, but First Army was not really sure about how to act on that letter immediately, so they were going to discuss it. Model and Walter Model, the general commander, and von Manteuffel planned an all-out attack on the 20th of December, and they used Nebelwerfers in support. The rockets landed on the mortar pits of the Americans, who were diminishing the lines of the Volksgrenadier battalions. So, as we can see, here's a pit, and the Americans were sitting in a pit like this, a bit deeper, with 2 guys and a mortar firing bombs into the forest. Being hammered by the Nebelwerfers, many soldiers crawled into the fetus position, and they were reciting Psalm 23 over and over again. In the valley of the shadow of death, I have no fear, etc., etc. Visibility was still bad, according to Hasbrouck, who reported that the enemy attacked 21 times from north, east and south. 5 American field battalions fired 7,000 shells that day only. To prevent them running out of ammo, they scavenged the fields for deserted depots, and rumor has it that 434th even used some old propaganda canisters, quote, just to keep pounding Jerry, unquote. One attack was led by SS Panzergrenadiers of Leibstandarte Adolf Hitler, who used an American half-track to mask their advance. Bazooka teams and Shermans stopped them in their tracks because they were seeing through this trick. The troops were ordered not to waste any ammo, with the order, quote, every bullet means 1 dead body on the ground, unquote, and shooting should not be commenced on distances further than 25 meters out, especially in the forest around the town. The Führerbegleitbrigade, Brigade, under command of Raymer, started an attack on St Vith from Bühlingen in the northeast. But Raymer thought that the US resistance in this area was too heavy, and he sent his brigade into the forests north of St Vith. over there. Or maybe over there. Remember, this is a bit scaled. He was complaining that he was lacking fuel after he received orders to turn south again. And that was a bit obsolete, that complaint, because his objective was to go to Ober and Nieder-Emmels. That was in reality only 5 kilometers to the west. Over there. Okay, so the Führerbegleitbrigade Brigade was not going south, but the battle was still raging. In the night, Hasbrouck was in the town, and his men and Hasbrouck himself, they heard the noise of tracks of approaching tanks, so they were sure that the Germans would attack in even heavier formations the next day. So, on the 21st of December, when the sun rose, the Americans were expecting to see the Germans come out of the forest in force. But the attack only came close to 12 p.m. at noon. The Volksgrenadiers started to take out the American MG pits with grenades and Panzerfausts. So they fired the Panzerfaust into an MG pit and taking it out that way. American artillery used scattering fire in all directions because the Germans were so close, and even though they were short on ammo, they always reacted within 2 to 4 minutes to calls for support, and the shells landed as close as 50 meters from their own troops. At 3:15 in the afternoon there was a lull in the fighting, but Major Boyer, also present in the town, feared that this was just the eye of the storm. Half an hour later the Nebelwerfers opened fire again, and the rockets were flying out of the forest and landing between the American troops. Trees snapped open, branches fell down on the Americans, and from time to time screams were heard from people who got hit. The others had only one thing to do, and that was to duck even further down into their foxholes, crawling against the front walls, hoping they would not get hit directly. The Germans attacked under the cover of this intense barrage. So when the Americans were defending, they were sitting in their foxholes in the forest, and the tactic of the Germans was to make the wood of the forest fall down on the Americans, so they would duck, and then in the meantime the Germans would be able to push the advance. So I'm gonna act like I'm a soldier in Boyer's troop, and I need a foxhole for that, and that's gonna be somewhere over here. Come on, foxhole. There are foxholes over here, I'm pretty sure. Oh, maybe it's on this side. Yep, here. MG pit. So, I'm an MG. The advancing Germans are coming there. So they fire Panzerfausts at me, and they threw M24 Stielhandgranaten, the potato mashers. And when I was ducking like this, then Boyer would shout, "Heads up!" as soon as the firing paused for a bit. And then we could open fire on the Germans again, who were trying to cross the forest path. There were also Stuks and Panthers in the attack, and there was a Stuk that was taken out by a guy with a bazooka, and there was also an American soldier that was running after a Panther. He then put his bazooka on the armor. Wait, let's do that for a minute. This dude with the bazooka, he ran towards the Panther. The Panther didn't see him, and he put his bazooka right against the armor of the tank, like this. And he fired, and while I'm still alive now in Forgotten Hope 2, in reality the guy died. So, but he did take out the Panther, so it was a heroic death. Not to glorify death, of course, but it was at least it wasn't in vain, because he did take out the tank. So the Stug and the Panther were taken out. 2 Panthers started to take out the foxholes by firing into them directly. So they blasted them with high explosive shells, and one of Boyer's officers was in tears, shouting into the radio why there were no tank hunters coming to take out the Panther. But the sectors lacked any kind of armor, so they couldn't send in any support to do something about those Panthers. When night fell, Boyer reported that they might hold out until morning, but at 7 p.m. in the evening the Germans opened up again with the Nebelwerfers, and the Panzers cleared out the foxholes one by one. The German attacks came from 3 directions towards the town: from the north, from the east, and from the south. The defenders were soon overwhelmed, and each machine gun in Boyer's team was manned by various crews, and when a crew died, it was a new crew went up and manned the machine gun. Around 10 p.m. the German tanks had fought itself away into the city. Here we are at St Vith Church. That was bombed on the 9th of August in 1944 and almost entirely destroyed, as you can see. So this is not battle damage from the Battle of St Vith, because it was already bombed in the summer, way before the battle even started. Well, when the Germans entered the city, it means that the 38th Armored Infantry Battalion in the southeast was cut off. And after 5 days without any sleep, little food left, and many cases of frostbite, Boyer's battalion of 670 men was reduced to 185 standing. The rest was dead or heavily wounded. The snow started to fall even heavier now. Clark gave the order to regroup and set up defenses west of St Vith. That's in that direction over there. No, that's the south. It's in that direction over there. But Boyer thought he could not comply, so he told his men to split up in small groups and try to save themselves. They should try to save themselves, their own weapons, and the mortars. So they were carrying a rifle and a plate or a pipe from a mortar. One medic remained voluntarily with the wounded, and the rest of the men straggled into the forest, holding each other's equipment as not to lose each other in the darkness and the snow. The streets of St Vith were littered with debris and glass, and the slaughterhouse was on fire. So scared cattle ran amok in the town. There were cows and other animals were screaming and adding to the chaos of the battle. During the shelling of the day before, many civilians had sought refuge in the St. Joseph's Cloister. And even though that we have a flag here, there's not really an abbey, but the abbey was a popular place to seek shelter because it had sturdy and vaulted cellars. So as we can see in the church building over here, maybe this is not the abbey, because the abbey was not destroyed like this. But you can see here these vaulted ceilings, and the same ceilings were in the cellars of St. Joseph's Cloister, and everyone was thinking that they would be safe inside those cellars. Father Goffard joined them when the bombardment became more intense, and he tried to make an altar inside of the cloister. At the moment of the major German attack, the cloister was filled to the brim, and many of the people present were wounded American soldiers, who told the civilians of St Vith to make room for them. The retreating soldiers were of the 423rd Infantry Regiment of the 106th Division. The last remaining 3 Shermans, accompanied by some intelligence troop and a reconnaissance platoon, maneuvered carefully in the Roterstraße in the northwestern direction. So that could very well be this street. As you can see, we pass here the Buchlerturm. At the edge of the town, civilians were climbing upon the tanks, and they were trying to escape with the Shermans. The Germans opened a crossfire, but it was aimed too high, so the bullets and the tracers flew over the heads of the tank passengers, which meant that they and the tanks were safe. About 1.5 kilometers west of the town, the tanks set up on a little hill next to a patch of forest. The infantry went down the hill a little bit and started to dig in. The temperature dropped really fast now. A snowstorm was coming up. So I would say that the Shermans and the infantry might have dug in about, well, I think about over here. I didn't read anything about this water here. Maybe it's the Wiesenbach. But the Shermans and the infantry went to this hill over there. The cold and starved Germans of the 18th and the 62nd Volksgrenadier Division entered the city and searched desperately for shelter and food, making it impossible for the German tanks to pursue the fleeing Americans properly. Hasbrouck and his men had set up defenses west of the town now, and the artillery started to pound the Germans in the city. St Vith had fallen to the Germans. The result of the battle was that the 5th Panzer Army got held back for almost a week, and Hasbrouck had done that with a very mixed bag of troops. The Germans rushing for the town caused another huge traffic jam, and an angry Model had to get out of his vehicle and walk into town because that was faster. This delay gave Clark and his Commando B the opportunity to retreat to a new line of defense. The delaying actions of the Americans continued west of the town, and it would take until the end of January before the Americans would retake it. So, this concludes the video about the Battle of St Vith. If you have any questions, please post them in the comments. If you know something about the Battle of St Vith that I didn't mention, please post that in the comments as well. Okay, well, that's it for this video. I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks for watching and have a nice day.